Today I'm showing you how to hand pleat your fabric for smocking. So I've already got my sample out here. This is just a 12-inch wide piece of fabric and I don't know how tall it is. And to do this you need a couple of things. You need a ruler that marks down to the 1/8 of an inch increments, and you need something to mark with. Now normally that would either be a water erase pen or a heat erase pen. I am today using a Sharpie just so that you can see what I'm doing. So the first step you need to do is mark your fabric, and you're just going to be putting dots on the fabric, and they are going to be in a row. So each dot in the row will be 1/4 inch apart, and then each row will be 3/8 of an inch apart. So what that looks like, I'm going to take my ruler and measure 3/8 of an inch up from this edge. And then I'm going to make a mark every 1/4 of an inch. And I'm doing this all the way across the fabric, and I'll stop 1/4 inch from the edge. Okay, so you can see this is what the first row looks like. Now what I'm going to do is measure 3/8 of an inch up from those dots and mark again at every 1/4 inch. And I'm going to keep doing this, doing the rows, until I have the number of rows I want. In this case I want 7 because I need 5 rows for smocking and then 2 holding rows. That would be 1 row at the top and 1 row at the bottom. That won't get smocked, they're just there to help hold the pleats in place and keep them neat. Okay, so that's the second row, and I'm just going to keep doing this until I have all of my rows, and then I'll be back. So I have my fabric fully marked, and I should note that this is on the wrong side of the fabric. I am currently using a solid fabric, so it technically doesn't matter, which is why I forgot to mention it. But you do want to make these marks on the wrong side of the fabric. And I also have needles threaded with a length of thread that's about the same size as my fabric, and I have 7 of them because I have 7 rows and I want 1 for each row. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a needle, I'm going to take my fabric, and everywhere that there is a dot I'm going to make a very small stitch. So that's 1 small stitch here at that first dot. I'm going to come up to the second dot and do a small stitch right there. Pretty much I do it about the size of each dot. Obviously not with that one because it's really big, but as I come to each one, and you can kind of, as you see I'm doing here, just front load it, I guess you could say, or load several onto the needle at once. And then pull it through. Now I could work all the way down to the end of this, but since my thread is a bit shorter than the width of the fabric, if I did that, the fabric would start scrunching up. So I'm going to stop while it can still lay flat and do the remaining rows. I'm just going to come with another needle and do the same thing. 1 stitch at each dot. So now that I've got all of the rows started, what I'm going to do, since my thread isn't long enough to get all the stitches in before I start pleating, I'm just going to pull, and it's going to start forming the pleats. and I'm just going to push the pleats all the way towards the knot at the beginning of the fabric, just so that they're out of the way. And you can see this is kind of how it's going to pleat up as I go. It's kind of like cartridge pleats. And now that it's pushed back, I'm just going to finish out each of these rows as soon as I untangle my needles. So anyway, I'm going to finish out each of these rows all the way to that last dot, and then I will be back. So now that I have the threads pulled all the way through, I am going to get ready to tie it off to the appropriate size. Now, I started out with a 12-inch wide piece. Typically with smocking, I go with 3 times the size that I want it to be finished. So if I started with 12, this should come out to about 4 inches once it's pleated. That, of course, is kind of dependent on the type of fabric. Sometimes if it's thicker, you don't need as much. If you're doing something like picture smocking, then you might need more. So it varies a little, but about 3 times is my general rule. So I find that what's easiest is to go ahead and pin the fabric to the finished size. So in this case, 4 inches, so this end here. And then I'll bring this end up to the edge of my ruler and pin it in place a little bit too. This is just a steaming mat. I find, something really soft to pin into is best. So once it's pulled or pinned into place, I just pull the threads until it's all kind of tightened to 4 inches. Once it's evenly tightened, the pleats don't have to be even at this point, but once it's tightened, I just tie off these threads. I find that normally it's better to tie them in groups than it is to necessarily tie them one at a time, just because it keeps things from it keeps the knot from pulling out that way. So I can go ahead and clip these as I tie them off. Once they're tied off, I just spread the pleats out so that they're kind of evenly pleated. And this just takes some work to get about right. I don't worry about it too much to be perfect. Even with a smocking pleater, the pleats I have found just never turn out completely perfect. The closer it is, the easier it will be, of course. And once it's evened out, I do sometimes go ahead and just steam this to kind of lock the pleats in place so that they're not constantly shifting around as I'm smocking, but I don't think it's a necessary step. In fact, I think I started doing it because I had read something that I thought said I needed to block it at this point, only to realize that it actually meant to block it after it's smocked. So I don't even know if that step is necessary. It's just something that I personally do. So that's how you pleat your fabric, and next up is the fun part, which is smocking. Once that video is up, it will be on screen for you to check out, and thank you for watching.